All right, so let's, you know where to get the book if you don't have the book yet. I would say by Friday would be ideal to have it. Being that we, did first day or second day of school, the Thursday we did a small lesson, and then there was an assignment that I gave you the benefit of the doubt, which is awesome. So again, you get a half sheet of paper, half sheet of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that you can use on the test or quiz. So I would strongly encourage you all, my friends, to perhaps start thinking about it, at least getting stuff together for this packet. Okay, so variables, sample, information like that might be good to have in your packet. Quantitative versus qualitative. So, and I'm just reviewing a little bit from last week. Quantitative versus qualitative data. So quantitative says variables that are in numerical nature. They measure and count some characteristic. Okay? So this is like temperature or age or height. Okay? Qualitative is something that they are categories that this falls into. Okay? So you have some sort of label that comes along with these. Okay? Some variables appear to be quantitative because they're a number, but they're qualitative, such as your student ID number or your other stuff like that. So here and Caitlin came right. And then it also talked about in section 1, that you have some that are discrete. So some quantitative could fall under discrete, and some can be continuous. So discrete is like people. How many apples do you have in this barrel? We have 20 apples. We don't have 20.53 apples. Okay? So just be aware some of those differences. And again, as you are thinking about that half sheet, what kinds of things do you want to put on that half sheet? What we will do, here's the benefit of this half sheet. You staple that half sheet to any test or quiz. That's worth 1 point. Whatever you write on it. We had a student last year who did it, who wrote inspirational quotes on the half sheet. There was nothing else on that. Student did pretty well, so whatever. That is what it is. So just a couple things that kind of keep in mind. Now, as we are starting to move through on this class, I am now on page 4, so we're going to start talking about categorical data. Okay? And we've seen a lot of this information, and unfortunately, a lot of times this information is misconceived, or one thing, let's face this, people like to try to influence people, yes? So there's ways that we can represent data because we think it looks cutesy. So sometimes if you were to say use Excel, which is a way that you put data and you could represent data, there might be some ways that seem like it's a good idea to use. And I got to tell you, it's not. Three-dimensional graphs are not good ideas. Okay, they are influencers, meaning your graph is going to look like it could be bad. So if we have categories, so just on page 4, graphs are a powerful way to capture your eye. Okay, that's usually, hey, we have this. What I'm going to read about this now. This is great. Graphs aren't necessarily used to make judgment calls. It's just really to catch your eye originally, just so you can look at what the data states. But there's something called a bar graph. Okay, and a bar graph is a relatively simple graph. You've seen this before. A bar graph, something like this. Now, Stirrup didn't draw real well. The distance of the width of it, each of the widths should be identical. And usually you have some sort of category down here. And then you have a number that it happens. Okay. So it looks like they are on page 4. They talk about the top oil reserves where Valenzuela has, looks like, approaching 300,000, whatever MMBBL means. And then Saudi Arabia, Canada, Iran, Russia, UAE, US, China. So MMBBL is 1 million barrels. Okay. So you have the label of the countries on the bottom. Now, if you look at that graph, it seems to have a nice flow to it. It starts out with the highest and it goes to the lowest. You don't have to have these bar graphs as highest to lowest. It could go lowest to highest. It could go just anything. So your bar graph, you don't have to have it, in this kind of situation where it's dropping down. You could have it increasing if you wanted to. You could have it just all over the place. It doesn't matter what your bar graph is, just as long as those are really bad representations. No, that's not the Denver skyline of buildings. But the main thing is to make sure the width is always the same. Okay, if the width isn't the same, then it becomes a poorly represented graph. But a lot of times they might make one larger than the other. That gives you a larger amount of area, and it's there to influence you. Some things that come into place. The y-axis should begin with 0. A bar graph, which the y-axis starts with a different number, you could influence the reader to see something different. Okay? Let's face it, we as people, I'm old. I don't get the newspaper every day because I don't have time to read it Monday through Friday, but I get it Saturday and Sunday. My Saturday and Sunday mornings typically are this: coffee, cigarettes. No, I'm kidding. Just coffee. Coffee, newspaper, and I usually go to the sports page first because I like seeing the accomplishments of people, and then you read the rest of the newspaper and you see the downfalls of people. But I'm that person. So if you were to read a newspaper, which I realize is an old school kind of thing, they could have graphs in place. There could be colors. There could be colors of this or that. A lot of times, if you really wanted to influence somebody and you have a colored graph, you would use a real dominant color. And if you're trying to take away from somebody else, you would use a color that's a lesser amount. And when I say that, I'm not trying to take away from any one person or any thoughts or beliefs. I'm just saying we like what we research to be, falls in our category. I have a master's degree in education administration and supervision. I wrote something called a thesis. My thesis is basically 3 out of 5 chapters of a dissertation. If I wrote the last 2 chapters, I could get my PhD. I don't want to do that, okay? It doesn't fall into my wheelhouse of what I would like to do. My thesis is 108 pages. If you ever want to read it, I'll bring it in. If you need something to make you go to sleep, I'll bring it in. It's 108 pages, 3 chapters on the benefits, if block scheduling has any benefits to education, meaning having class every other day for 90 minutes versus every day. My conclusion showed? There's no difference. I spent 3 years doing research, collecting data to find that there's statistically no difference in a student's education based on a pre-test and post-test that I created So, did I really waste my time? No, I became a pro at block scheduling. So if a school says, hey, we're going to go to block scheduling, I'm like, hey, time out. I got 108 pages to tell you that there's no benefit as far as content that you would learn more in block scheduling versus traditional. I don't know if they look up stirrup stuff or not. All right, so the y-axis should be scaled and labeled. In this case, each tick mark for our oil is 100 million barrels. The x-axis should be clearly labeled with the various responses, in this case, the different nations. So again, I'm on page 4. And the bars must have equal width. The bars should not touch each other. Okay? If they touch each other, you have a left to right flow. So you're just talking about, each one of those bars is you've counted a certain thing. Another way to display information is called a circle graph. Okay? Now, if you ever go and jump onto Excel, you can create bar graphs, circle graphs. You're like, oh, and basically you, the user, is like, which one looks the best? Well, circle graphs are just a pie chart. You've probably heard this terminology before. So each one of these regions needs to be a percent. When you label a pie chart, you should have percents that are labeled. And the percent should be consistent with the size. Meaning, if I had, say, a pie chart, and I had one region, and I called this 50%, I'd say that's wrong. Agree? I'm not an unbelievable artist, but 50%, in my opinion, should be about half of it. Okay? Now, you don't need to be going into geometry and using, finding the angle, saying, yeah, that's 22 degrees, so that doesn't really incorporate that close to a percent. You don't have to do that, but where things start getting messy on circle graphs are when you have the regions that are really, really, really close to each other. Where you have, and let's say those are all relatively the same, it becomes harder and harder to see. Yes, they would make it colored. A lot of times they might say, this region is square, so square represents this. This region is triangle, so triangle represents this. This region is, say, rectangle. So you might have some sort of little key down below it. But again, you want, in a circle graph, you want them to be as percentages. So as it says, the well-constructed circle graph above is on page 5, follows the data. The circle graph should contain several features. Percentages indicated, we talked about. Obviously a circle is 360 degrees. We learned that in geometry at some point. So you're talking about central angles and stuff like that. No, this is not a geometry class. And again, just please make sure your 50% is, this type of region. If you're close, you're close. I'm not looking to measure it out exactly. Percentages represent the concept of parts of a whole. Percentages therefore add up to 100%. So if you were to add up on their thing they have, it says percentage of the Earth's crust, where you have 47% oxygen, 28% silicon, 9% others, 3.5% calcium, 4.5% iron, 8% aluminum. If we were to add those percents up, it should come out to 100%. If not, we have made an error. We left something out. Each section of the pie is called a sector. They should be shaded different, tones per sector, which you start running out of colors if you're using a grayscale. It becomes harder and harder to see. A title should represent and explain the purpose of the bar chart. In this case, it's the elements and percentage of the Earth's crust, and it goes down from that. Okay. Then on page 6, and this is going to be quick, these are some of the ways that the pie charts and the bar graphs are wrong. Okay? 3-dimensional pie charts are really bad. Okay? If you look at the one that they have there on the top of page 6 on the left, you have a 3-dimensional piece. That 3-dimensional piece appears to be coming out at you. The person who's writing the article is shoving it into your face, saying this means something. but it might not mean anything statistically sound. But if you were to look at that piece of pie that's coming out to you, that looks like that wedge doesn't even fit in there. It's not like a nice puzzle piece where it'd slide back in. It's that item C is coming out at you in 3 dimensions. That's a really poor representation. Honestly, if you were doing any type of research, if you came across a 3-dimensional pie chart, the information you're using, the person didn't understand statistics. Therefore, if they don't understand statistics, should you follow along with what their research showed? The answer is no. Okay, and I'm not trying to be an elitist or a prima donna, but there's things, if you were going to publish things and you're going to put it out for people to read, I'm not talking about you're publishing on a TikTok or your Instagram or your Snapchat or any of that stuff. I mean, that's all fun and dandy. Okay? Let's go back prior to the social media phases where texting would have come out. You'd have somebody who would write all in caps because they didn't know their caps lock was on. So someone would come back, why are you yelling at me? Yeah, I looked at it saying, hey, where are you at? Why are you yelling at me? Okay, it's capital letters versus lowercase. But I guess in the world of texting, I was a bad person. But I didn't know how to I mean, this is flip phone state, where 3 letters represented each number. So you'd have to go, on number 1, you'd have to go A, B, C. No, oh, dang it, I went too far. Back to A. So that was early texting stuff. Comparison of the pie charts, they both mean basically the same thing, but the one on the left is indeed misleading. And again, also on the misleading pie chart, you have item A, item B, item C, item D. There's no percentages there, so that's also misleading. Okay, so you just don't know what was there. So you have, the pie chart on the right, you have the percents. That pie chart's fine. Yes, it's grayscaled, so it's kind of hard to see, but grayscaled versus color, I mean, you have to know what looks good. The bar graphs on the bottom of page 6, they are the exact same bar graph, but if you look at the y-axis on the left has a much different growth rate than the y-axis on the other one, meaning the vertical. So if you look at the one on the left, it's 3.140, 3.142, and these are in percents, 3.144. So it's going up. The bar graph on the left side is going up by 0.002%. The bar graph on the right is going up by 0.5%. Okay, so it goes from 0 to 0.5 to 1% to 1.5 to 2% to 2.5 to 3%. They both are the exact same bar graph. That's the problem. The one on the left really is there to influence you. The one on the right basically, doesn't show any exaggeration of our data. Okay, if you looked at the one at the right, it looks like a relatively boring one. Now, my point on boring versus not boring, things in statistics, I mean, honestly, if you are delved really deep into statistics, it's kind of boring. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but you get really nitpicky on stuff. I mean, if you look at the two, I think the graph on the bottom that shows growth impacts the reader a lot more. It catches their eye. Is it wrong to do that? No. But as long as you're growing by the same rate, so you didn't go on your y-axis saying, I'm going to grow by 0.02, and then this one's going to go up by 0.7, and this one's only going to grow up by 0.3. It has to grow consistently. The one on the left, yes, it does seem to be some sort of traumatic stuff that's taken place. I don't even know what this is. Oh, it's just interest rates. Okay? So any of the news stations, in this case, if you looked at this, it appears that the interest rates are skyrocketing. If you look at this, let's say I can draw this really well. This looks like interest rates are remaining relatively the same. What do you want your reader to know? Who do you want to influence? That's the goofy thing. Okay, so I think I'm good. Do we have questions about what we talked about? Is it okay? Everyone know where to go and get book for the class? All right. If not, this is still good for the next couple of weeks. I can't find my. Oh, there it is. All right. So 97, 98 we've already done. So with your best efforts, would you try pages 99 through 101? It's not a lot of information. I think you have enough time to get a start on it. And I'm happy. Let me just hit save on my recording, and I'll come around and help you. It shouldn't be too tough, though.